Serial killers
of Washington State.
Every state is known for something.
Florida has swamps and beautiful weather. Iowa has wrestling and corn. New York has Manhattan and Brooklyn-style pizza. Maryland has crab cakes.
Washington has apples, wine, IPAs, and serial killers. This video is not meant to glorify these evil people in any way, just shed some light on a bizarre Washington truth. From Bundy to the Green River Killer, these are some of the deadliest killers in Washington state history. Robert Lee Yates. The spoken serial killer killed at least 16 people between 1975 to 1998. Like the Green River Killer, Robert Lee Yates preyed on sex workers that he solicited. Every known victim of Yates was shot in the head. Before terrorizing Spokane, Yates lived in Oak Harbor and, ironically enough, would work at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla for nearly 2 years as a corrections officer before enlisting in the Army. After many years in the Army, Yates served in the National Guard for 3 years. Most of his murders occurred during his 21-year-long military career.
Yates was initially given a plea deal to avoid the death penalty in 2000, but would later be charged with 2 more murders in 2002 while in prison. For those 1997 and 1998 murders, Yates would be given the death penalty. When Washington abolished the death penalty in 2018, Yates' sentence became life without parole. Robert Lee Yates is serving his sentence where he used to work, the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Wesley Allen Dodd. Wesley Allen Dodd, born in Richland, Washington, sexually assaulted and killed 3 boys over the span of 2 months in 1989. Leading up to his heinous crimes, he had engaged in shocking behavior such as exposing himself at the age of 15, attempted kidnapping at age 20, molesting a boy in 1984, and attempting to lure a young boy into an empty building in 1987. In each of these instances, he was hardly punished, if at all. In the fall of 1989, Dodd abused and murdered 3 boys and was finally caught in November when he tried to kidnap another. Wesley Allen Dodd was executed by a hanging at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in 1993. Ted Bundy. Of Ted Bundy's 20 confirmed victims, 7 of them were living in Washington when they were killed. What is truly terrifying about Bundy is that while he was a student at the University of Washington, he was on the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee, at one point writing a pamphlet for women on rape prevention. He would graduate with a degree in psychology in 1972. While in Seattle, he would serve on several political campaigns, including the presidential campaign of Nelson Rockefeller and the successful gubernatorial campaign of Dan Evans. The rest of Ted Bundy's life is pretty well known. He used his charm and looks to disarm young women, violently assaulted them before brutally murdering them. On 2 separate occasions, Bundy would escape captivity. The first escape was made possible because Bundy, acting as his own lawyer, was given access to the 2nd-story library of the jail. He jumped out the window. The first escape was not as long as the second. After crawling out of the ceiling of his cell, Bundy caught a train from Michigan and went on a rampage in Florida.
He broke into a college sorority at Florida State University, assaulting several girls and killing 2. Just under a month later, he would abduct and kill a 12-year-old girl. 4 days later, he would be arrested again. Bundy would once again act as his own lawyer in Florida. The court would find him guilty, and he would be given 3 death sentences. While Bundy was confirmed to have killed 20 people, he confessed to the 30 murders and is likely to have killed even more than that. It's hard to understand why, but Bundy had a large following of admiring women. He would marry one of them in 1980 and father a child with her the next year.
Ted Bundy was executed by an electric chair at Florida State Prison in 1989.
Joseph Condro. The Longview serial killer is believed to have killed several children, but was only convicted of 2 murders in 1985 and 1996. Prior to the killings, he was found guilty of he had a criminal record comprised of drunk driving, domestic abuse, theft, and drug dealing, among other crimes. When he was arrested in 1997, he confessed to the murder in 1985 as a part of a plea deal.
He then told the prosecutors he had used the victim's safe word to lure her into his car. He is believed to have killed even more children.
Joseph Condro died of liver disease at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in 2012. Martin Stickles.
The Kelso killer murdered 3 people at the beginning of the 1900s. He killed all of his victims by shooting a rifle into their windows.
He would steal all valuables he could find, and in the case of his first murder, he burned a house down.
Martin Stickles was hanged in 1901 in Kalama, Washington.
Even though his execution was botched, he died instantly.
Billy Gohl.
Gohl, a member of a sailors' union, is believed to have preyed on sailors. If he believed a sailor was from out of town and had valuables, that person was not safe.
Billy Gohl is believed to have killed anywhere from 2 to over 100 people at the dawn of the 20th century. He is believed to have shot his victims, robbed them, then dumped them into the Wishkah River.
He was sent to the Washington State Penitentiary to serve a life sentence.
Billy Gohl died from complications of syphilis in 1927 at a hospital in Spokane, Washington.
Charles Rodman Campbell. While not technically a serial killer, Charles Rodman Campbell did kill 3 people in a disturbing fashion, and the story as a whole is unsettling.
In 1973, he sexually assaulted a woman at knife point in her yard.
He threatened her life and the life of her baby if she didn't do what he commanded. She called the police after he left and reported the crime.
He was arrested, charged, and sentenced to 40 years.
Because they were not consecutive sentences, he was released 6 years later.
Campbell's victim was not made aware of this, nor was she told when he was released.
In an act of revenge, he killed the woman, her daughter who was now 9, and her neighbor that had testified against him. The neighbor's husband found the 3 victims. Charles Rodman Campbell was executed by a hanging at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in 1994. Joseph Edward Duncan III. In 2005, Joseph Edward Duncan III brutally murdered a Kurd family before kidnapping the surviving 2 children.
Brenda Groney, boyfriend Mark Mackenzie, and Brenda's son Slade were found murdered in their home. The home had been broken into in the middle of the night. Duncan's criminal history began in Tacoma more than 2 decades before he was finally put away for good. In 1978, he sexually assaulted a young boy at gunpoint. Duncan was only 15 years old.
This would begin a span of violent crimes of a sexual nature, something Duncan seemed to take great pride in.
He told a therapist that by the time he was 16, he had sexually assaulted more than a dozen young boys. In 1980, Duncan was sentenced to 20 years in prison after he kidnapped and sexually assaulted a teenage boy in Tacoma. He had also stolen guns from nearby homes. Duncan would be released 6 years early in 1994. It is believed that Duncan killed 3 people while still on parole, including 2 young Seattle girls.
He would return to prison in 1997, only to be released again in 2000.
Duncan was convicted of several charges, spanning multiple states.
He would be given 3 federal death sentences.
He died in 2021 from glioblastoma while still in prison at 58.
After his death, Shasta said, "Today, I woke up feeling like my soul was finally free."
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant killed 4 people, 3 being children, beginning when he was only 18 years old.
From 1969 to 1971, Grant ran wild, terrorizing the people of Renton.
He was tried and found guilty on 4 counts of murder.
Cary Grant is currently serving 4 consecutive life sentences at the Monroe Correctional Complex in Monroe, Washington.
He will never be released. Gary Ridgway. The Green River Killer confessed to over 71 murders in 2001 and was convicted of 49. Gary Ridgway was most active in the 1980s, officially operating from 1982 to 1998.
Some say he could have killed as recently as 2001.
Prior to the conviction of Samuel Little, Ridgway was the deadliest serial killer in American history.
He preyed on sex workers along State Route 99 near Tacoma, often murdering them while engaging in the act of sex.
He discarded several of his victims in the Green River. The Green River Killer was so elusive, Ted Bundy even assisted in a search.
As part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, not only did Ridgway plead guilty to all 48 initial murder charges, he cooperated with investigators and went out with them to the locations of his victims' bodies.
Gary Ridgway is serving a life sentence without parole at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Kenneth Bianchi. The Hillside Strangler killed 12 people, including 2 in Washington State, in the late 1970s. While the first 10 killings were done with help from his cousin in California, the last 2 murders were committed by Bianchi alone in 1979.
He would be apprehended, tried, and convicted in Washington.
Kenneth Bianchi is currently serving a life sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He is eligible to apply for parole in 2025 after being denied in 2010.
The Tube Sock Killings. 46 people were killed in Mineral, Washington in 1985.
Multiple victims have been found with tube socks wrapped around their necks. The killer has never been found. Jake Bird. Jake Bird was executed in Washington for the 1947 murders of 2 women in Tacoma.
He is also known to have murdered at least 11 other people across several states between 1930 and 1947.
Prior to his execution, Bird had implicated himself in up to 46 murders. Jake Bird, a black man, had actually stalked and killed dozens of white women in the 1940s in dozens of states.
Continues to challenge traditionally held profiles of serial killers. Linda Laura Hazzard. Nicknamed the Starvation Doctor, Linda was an American quack, swindler and convicted serial killer noted for her promotion of fasting, pummeling and hours-long enemas as treatment. In 1911, Hazzard was found guilty of manslaughter in the state of Washington and was sentenced to 2 to 20 years of hard labor for killing at least 15 people for financial gain at a sanitarium she operated near Seattle in the early 20th century.
She was released on parole after only serving 2 years and later, on the condition that she moved to New Zealand, received a full pardon from Governor Ernest Lister in 1916.
Linda Laura Hazzard died at the age of 70 after subjecting herself to her own treatment methods.
Randall Brent Woodfield. Randall Brent Woodfield is an American serial killer, serial rapist, kidnapper, robber, burglar and former football player who was dubbed the I-5 Killer or the I-5 Bandit by the media due to the crimes he committed along the Interstate 5 corridor running through Washington, Oregon and California.
Before his capture, Woodfield was suspected of multiple sexual assaults and murders.
Though convicted in only one murder, he has been linked to a total of 18 murders and is suspected of having killed up to as many as 44 people.
A native of Oregon, Woodfield was the third child of a prominent Newport family.
He began to exhibit abnormal behaviors during his teenage years and was arrested for indecent exposure while still in high school. An athlete for much of his life, Woodfield played as a wide receiver for the Portland State Vikings and was drafted by the National Football League in 1974 to play for the Green Bay Packers, but was cut from the team during training after a series of indecent exposure arrests.
In 1975, Woodfield began a string of robberies and sexual assaults on women in Portland, which he committed at knife point. Between 1980 and 1981, he committed multiple murders in cities along the I-5 corridor.
His earliest documented murder was that of Terry Ayers, a former classmate whom he had known since childhood, in October 1980.
After committing numerous violent crimes, Woodfield was arrested in March 1981 and convicted in June of the murder of Shari Hull and attempted murder of her co-worker, Faith Wilmot.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 90 years.
In a subsequent trial, he was convicted of sodomy and improper use of a weapon in a sexual assault case, receiving 35 additional years to his sentence.
Woodfield has never confessed to any of the crimes of which he has been accused or convicted. Though he has only been convicted of one murder and one attempted murder, he has been linked via DNA and other methods in numerous unsolved homicides in the ensuing decades.
Authorities have estimated his total number of killings to be as many as 44.
CBS News named him one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. Randall Brent Woodfield is currently incarcerated at the Oregon State Penitentiary.
Donna Perry. Donna Perry, born Douglas Perry, is an American serial killer.
She was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in 2014 for killing 3 women in 1990.
Perry underwent gender-affirming surgery in 2000.
Her gender identity formed a portion of the defense's argument.
Perry alleges sexual abuse by her father from age 4 until her father's death 3 years later, according to her attorney. Perry's criminal record lists various charges dating back to 1974. In 1987, Perry was charged with reckless endangerment. In 1988, Perry was arrested for possessing a pipe bomb and was subsequently found to have 49 guns and 20,000 rounds of ammunition. In 1989, Perry was arrested for soliciting a prostitute. In the late 1990s, Perry spent 18 months in jail after being pulled over in Oregon's red light district with a gun and knife. During this prison sentence, Perry allegedly confessed to her cellmate to killing 9 prostitutes. Perry shot and killed Yolanda Sapp, 26, Nikki Lowe, 34, and Kathleen Brisbois, 38 during a 4-month period in 1990.
Sapp's body was discovered on February 22nd, Lowe's on March 25th, and Brisbois on May 15th. The women were all found naked near the Spoken River, where they were dumped.
Until 2012, they were believed to be additional victims of convicted serial killer Robert Yates. On July 24, 2017, Perry was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. She is currently detained at the Washington Correction Center for Women in Gig Harbor, Washington.